This is WILN's Late Edition.
Welcome back to Late Edition. Governor Ed Rendell wants to increase the money spent on transportation. He says many roads and bridges are in need of repair. He made stops in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and on Route 42 just north of Tristela today, which is where we caught up with him.
We need to fund our transportation infrastructure, and we need to fund it now. There can't be any waiting. And this bridge, the Roaring Creek Bridge here in Cunningham Township, is a perfect example of why we need the legislature to fund transportation infrastructure now. Back in May, I asked the legislature to come forward and have a special session on transportation and transportation funding. The special session was necessitated because the federal government turned down Pennsylvania's request to toll I-80. That request was part of a plan put together in something called Act 44 that we passed in 2007 that added $1 billion a year to transportation funding. And when I say transportation funding, I'm talking about bridges, roads, highways, mass transit. Act 44 put $1 billion on the table, but when the federal government turned down our application to toll I-80, we lost $472 million. So I asked the legislature to meet in special session. That session was put aside while we were doing the budget, and I've asked them to return to Harrisburg on August 23rd and spend the 2 weeks before Labor Day dealing with this problem. This bridge will take $1.4 million to bring up to safe standards. And that $1.4 million was in the 472 that we lost. As all of you know, this bridge is 70 years old. The average recommended lifespan for bridges is 40 years. This bridge should have been retired a long time ago. And this bridge is a significant bridge here in Columbia County. 2,200 vehicles cross this bridge every day, and it's one of 37 structurally deficient bridges in Columbia County. 1 out of every 8 state-owned bridges in Columbia County is deficient, structurally deficient. Statewide, we have 5,500 bridges that are structurally deficient. It's not because we haven't tried to address this program. The year before I was governor, we were spending $250 million a year on bridge repair. This last year, that money had increased to $800 million a year. But we also, in addition to leading the nation in the number of structurally deficient bridges, we lead the nation in the number of bridges we have that are over 75 years of age. So every time we fix 2 bridges, and PennDOT's done a great job, every time we fix 2 bridges, 3 more go on the structurally deficient list. Thanks to the $1.2 billion that the federal government gave us in the stimulus program, with that money, with an extra $400 million bond issue that I persuaded the legislature to do for our accelerated bridge program, across the length and breadth of Pennsylvania, there are 1,300 bridges being repaired today. That's going to allow us to cut into our structurally deficient total of bridges for the first time ever. But we've got to raise public awareness of this, and that's why we're on this tour. If we took those 5,500 structurally deficient bridges and put on each side of the bridge a big sign saying, "The bridge you just crossed is structurally deficient," well, we'd do 2 things. One, we'd scare the bejabbers out of people, and they'd be talking to their legislators for sure. 2, we would increase the economy because someone would have to make those 11,000 signs necessary to put on either side of the bridges. But seriously, that's the situation. It's just that bad. There is no better job creator, none, in the United States of America than infrastructure spending, and particularly transportation infrastructure. It creates good family-sustaining jobs both here on the construction sites and back in the factories that supply us with the things we need to do reconstruction. June 30th, we took a snapshot of the stimulus funding in Pennsylvania. And remember, the $1.2 billion was split. Half was spent last year's construction cycle. Half is being spent now. We took a snapshot, and we found that on projects funded solely by the half of the $1.2 billion stimulus, there were 8,600 men and women working on the construction sites, on the bridges, on the roads, etc. We also checked with the vendors who were supplying the steel, the asphalt, the concrete, the aggregate, the lumber, the paint to those projects. And we found that they had hired or hired back 3,600 workers in those factories just to supply those contracts. So all told, over 12,000 people were working because of that investment. Now, where are we going to come up with this money? It's tough. But the people in this country and the people of Pennsylvania have shown time and time again in poll after poll that they're willing to pay for infrastructure spending because they can see the results. They can touch it. They can ride on it. They know it's real. I want a little audience participation here. We'll even ask the press to participate. I know they don't like to answer questions, just ask them, but we'll let them participate too. How many of you know what it costs, what fee we charge you to get a driver's license? Raise your hand if you know the exact total. About a tenth of you here. That means 90% have no clue. How many of you know what we charge you in fee to get your car registration? A little bit more, about a ninth of you know that. Shows nobody has a clue. If we raise those fees, nobody would even notice. But even more importantly, almost all of our fees haven't been raised in a long time. Our licensing fee hasn't been raised since 2003. Our registration fee since 1997. If we just raised our fees consistent with inflation, so take licensing, 2003, 7 years it hasn't been raised. Inflation in those 7 years has been 18%. If we just raise that fee 18%, and everybody understands that things go up by inflation, if we just raised it by inflation and raised all our fees by inflation, it would produce $327 million a year. And then if we took our gas tax, which was last raised by Governor Ridge in 1997, and we raised it by inflation, that would be 3.5 cents a gallon. That would produce $240 million. All told, almost $600 million. More than enough to replace the I-80 funding, more than enough to make sure that the Roaring Creek Bridge gets rebuilt. Now, 3.5 cents at the pump, do you think any of you would notice that? Of course not, because gasoline prices fluctuate from week to week.
What you're telling people to do is contact legislators, representatives that get on this.
And say, let's do it now. It's time.
Like you said, if you're saying let's do it now, if quite a number of people did it, how long would something like that take to
do? We could have bills passed and funding put in place by Labor Day. No question about it.
Has any other state done anything like this?
Oh, sure. Illinois, California have done significant spending. And let me tell you, no economy is good right now, but we have the best economy of any large state in the union. And it's because we've invested so much in infrastructure. We've invested so much in the Capital Redevelopment Assistance Program. That keeps people working. That keeps spending. That keeps orders going into Pennsylvania factories.